We are reading A Course in Miracles, and we are reading now sections from the Manual for Teachers, and this is section 7, and the question here is, should healing be repeated? This question really answers itself. Healing cannot be repeated. If the patient is healed, what remains to heal him from? And if the healing is certain, as we have already said it is, what is there to repeat? For a teacher of God to remain concerned about the result of healing is to limit the healing. It is now the teacher of God himself whose mind needs to be healed. And it is this he must facilitate. He is now the patient, and he must so regard himself. He has made a mistake and must be willing to change his mind about it. He lacked the trust that makes for giving truly, and so he has not received the benefit of his gift. Whenever a teacher of God has tried to be a channel for healing, he has succeeded. Should he be tempted to doubt this, he should not repeat his previous effort. That was already maximal because the Holy Spirit so accepted it and so used it. Now the teacher of God has only one course to follow. He must use his reason to tell himself that he has given the problem to one who cannot fail, and must recognize that his own uncertainty is not love but fear, and therefore hate. His position has thus become untenable, for he is offering hate to one to whom he offered love. This is impossible. Having offered love, only love can be received. It is in this that the teacher of God must trust. This is what is really meant by the statement that the one responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself. The teacher of God is a miracle worker because he gives the gifts he has received. Yet he must first accept them. He need do no more, nor is there more that he could do. By accepting healing, he can give it. If he doubts this, let him remember who gave the gift and who received it. Thus is his doubt corrected. He thought the gifts of God could be withdrawn. That was a mistake, but hardly one to stay with. And so the teacher of God can only recognize it for what it is and let it be corrected for him. One of the most difficult temptations to recognize is that to doubt a healing because of the appearance of continuing symptoms is a mistake in the form of lack of trust. As such, it is an attack. Usually it seems to be just the opposite. It does appear unreasonable at first to be told that continued concern is attack. It has all the appearances of love. Yet love without trust is impossible, and doubt and trust cannot coexist. And hate must be the opposite of love, regardless of the form it takes. Doubt not the gift, and it is impossible to doubt its result. This is the certainty that gives God's teachers the power to be miracle workers, for they have put their trust in him. The real basis for doubt about the outcome of any problem that has been given to God's teacher for resolution is always self-doubt. And that necessarily implies that trust has been placed in an illusory self, for only such a self can be doubted. This illusion can take many forms. Perhaps there is a fear of weakness and vulnerability. Perhaps there is a fear of failure and shame associated with a sense of inadequacy. Perhaps there is a guilty embarrassment stemming from false humility. The form of the mistake is not important. What is important is only the recognition of a mistake as a mistake. The mistake is always some form of concern with the self to the exclusion of the patient. It is a failure to recognize him as part of the self, capital S, and thus represents a confusion in identity. Conflict about what you are has entered your mind, and you have become deceived about yourself. And you are deceived about yourself because you have denied the source of your creation. If you are offering only healing, you cannot doubt. If you really want the problem solved, you cannot doubt. If you are certain what the problem is, you cannot doubt. Doubt is the result of conflicting wishes. Be sure of what you want, and doubt becomes impossible. On the surface, this is challenging, what is being said here. and Jesus acknowledges that it's challenging. He's saying, can healing be, or should healing be repeated? Certainly not. Why are you doubting? Why are you doubting and not trusting that when you give a problem to the Holy Spirit, it's solved. But then Jesus says, well, on the surface, it does appear to make sense to say, this person does not seem to be healed, even though I gave the problem to the Holy Spirit, but this problem has not been, this person still has a problem. But therein lies the problem. Therein lies the problem, because if you see a problem to begin with, you've made a mistake, right? What is the atonement principle that Jesus mentions here? He says the one responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself or herself, right? This is a line that is repeated throughout the course from the very beginning. The one responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself. What is the atonement? The atonement is that there is no problem, right? So you have to start with that. That basic premise is there is no problem. There is no need for healing, actually, in reality. And that's another thing, So even, healing someone to begin with is not, does not make sense either. What really needs to be healed? It's only your perception, right? Only your perception that there is a problem. That's the only problem that there is, if you even want to call that a problem. But you can forgive that as well, that you can forgive the fact that you see a problem and then there's no problem. You bring the atonement principle to everything, which is that there's no problem at all. And don't make a problem if there is no problem. Jamaica, no problem, man. There is no problem. So I think that's the greater point that's being made here, is that and it's kind of the unspoken. It's kind of unspoken here in what Jesus doesn't come right out and say it. He kind of does when he talks about the atonement, accepting the atonement for yourself. What is the atonement? The atonement is that there is no separation, right? There is no problem in reality. The problem is only in your eyes, right? Only how you're seeing it, how you're interpreting it, is the only thing, right? And why are you interpreting it that way? Ultimately comes down to fear, and it comes, and he says, fear, it's really hate, and ultimately it is not love but hate. And you have to be clear about what that is, that you want there to be a problem, right? You want to see your brother as not whole and not perfect, and you want to be somehow above your brother, or see, differences. And that is the work. So, kind of this is a trick question that, Jesus is setting up this trick question. Should healing be repeated? No. In reality, again, there's no need for healing. That's an illusion too. The healing is really, the only healing would be forgiveness. Forgiveness itself is an illusion. It's not real. There's nothing to forgive. Again, in reality, there's nothing to forgive. It's very hard for us to see it that way, and that's where forgiveness comes in. Is to forgive us ourselves for the illusion that there's a need for forgiveness, right? This is all somewhat complicated in a way, but it's really not. It's very simple. It's just to remain in that place, to remain constant in that place of that there is no problem. And that's very difficult. That's very difficult because our eyes tell us otherwise, right? We see a world that seems to really need saving, and we see people that really need to be saved, and we feel ourselves that we really need to be saved. But all of that is, in the way of our salvation. And we don't see that until a teaching comes along like this and reminds us that that's the case. Anyway, I'll leave it at that for now. I hope this was helpful. As always, feel free to leave a comment, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and your feedback and your input. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon. Adios.